So welcome to Domaine St. Gayan. I will introduce very briefly the history and the estate itself. We are located in the southeast of France, in the region named Provence, and in the northern part of Provence actually, and located especially in Gigondas itself. Here you can see the map of the Rhone Valley, the whole Rhone Valley, and you can see where Gigondas is. We are in the middle south part of the Rhone Valley. So the estate, yep, the estate is located on the foot of on the feet of the Dentelle de Montmirail, which is a very, quite long line of stony spikes located on the west part of the Ventoux mountain. And those spiny rocks gives us a very special climate and a situation for the wind, the sun exposure, very specific. So our estate is located on the northern limits of Gigondas. We are settled both on Gigondas and Sablé, which is the northern village, the next northern village next to Gigondas. And we are settled, we have vineyards settled on several villages around, including Rasto, which is in the west part, crossing the Yves river. We have also vineyards on Camaret-sur-Aigle, which is located next to Orange, the big city around. And we have also one vineyard located in Courthézon, which is the eastern part of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape appellation. This is the house. You can see that we are located in the valley. The house is located precisely in the bed of a very tiny river called Le Trignon, which is the natural frontier between Gigondas and Sablé. This is a very small river that flows down from the Dentelle de Montmirail. Another picture of the house. And here is a part of the historical parts. Sorry, the estate exists from 1705 or 9, sorry, which is the house actually, the farm was built in 1705 by our ancestor called Pierre Goubert, and they passed on the house from one generation to another until the end of World War I, where the name changed actually because the owners had just one daughter who married a maître from another village around named Siguré. So this is the age time where the name changed actually from Goubert to maître. This is the son of Léa Goubert, Gustave, who took over the estate later. And then the Meurtre family went on from Gustave to actually to today Jean-Pierre. And I work here for 13 years now, since 2006. This is a family portrait of the winemakers. And a dual portrait of me and my father-in-law, Jean-Pierre. Action time. So this is mostly stony soils. Actually, the Dentelle de Montmirail gave us a lot of stones by the flowing of the river Crillon. And we have the estate and the vineyards of the estate, especially the Gigondas vineyards, are located mainly all around the house. So we have a very special location here, because all the vineyards you can see around the estate here are of quite the same terroir. This is a very c'est très homogène. This is quite the same soils from one vineyard to another. Concerning the vineyards located around the house, this is mainly stony clay soils. But the more you go north, the more you get sands, because this is the main characteristic of the terroir from Sablé, Sablé, which reminds the word sable, sand in French, because the main soils in Sablé are sands.
Okay.
So, Christian, Yves, can we know why your wife is not on the photograph of the family?
Sorry?
Why is your wife not on the photograph of the family?
Oh, because actually she's a vet, and she's not part of the estate. So. In fact, I met my wife in Belgium when we made our studies. We made veterinary studies, and while she succeeded in her studies, obviously, I went off 2 years after beginning my studies, and I turned around and went to agronomic sciences, which was more fit for my interest centers. And after our studies, I started to work from time to time with Jean-Pierre, as for our vacation times. We went some time in Gigondas with Julie, my wife. And as there is always a lot of work, I used to help a little bit Jean-Pierre for the preparing orders and stuff like that. And 1 year I work at the estate just for the summertime, just make a little bit of money. And I quite enjoyed the work I made there, but the real time the revealing time was the next year, because this was my last year of study, and I had to write a thesis, and I had also to work in in a corporation, and so Jean-Pierre proposed me to work at the estate, and this was a very this was a revelation actually, because that time I spent 4 months at the estate, following Jean-Pierre everywhere, and I started to learn the job there, and the passion of the vine cultures and winemaking just revealed itself to me.
That's a great story. Thank you.
But my wife is always on my side.
Are you related to Gabriel Beff?
Actually, no, not exactly. It's another branch of the Meffre family, which belongs to Gigondas. The Meffre family from Domaine St Gayan is affiliated to the village of Séguré. Here you have a small view of what we produce. Starting with the white, perhaps first with the reds, because especially for the Gigondas is our very main production actually. This is our very first wine, the very first wine we ever made on the estate, which is the reason we called it Origine, because it speaks for itself in many languages. And this is very important for us to introduce this wine first, because it's kind of our signature, and by the way we make this wine, we show people how we can make other wines, like Rasto, which is another cru of the Côte d'Ivoire, and even for Châteauneuf. This philosophy, this way of making the wine, can be retrieved in every one of our wines, even if the white of the rosé. So we have our main cuvée, Gigondas, our main wine. As I said earlier, we have also some Rasto and some Château du Pin. Our Côte d'Ivoire Trescartes actually is made from the vines, the vineyards located on Sablé, just across the river in the northern part of the estate. But the white wine is also made from those vineyards. And the reason why some people always ask me why we don't make Sablé in red Sablé. It's very simple. Is that because we started to sell Côte d'Ivoire made from vineyards in Sablé long before Sablé gained his named appellation. Actually, the whites are more recent, and the production was small enough to make a special cuvée, white cuvée in Sablé, named Sablé actually. And we have also white and rosé in a smaller appellation called Méditerranée, and we named it Argile because it's a brand new line in the list of our wines. So here you have some numbers. not very interesting, but it gives you a small picture of the proportions of the wines we can produce. Actually, you can see that we have more than half of the estate on the vineyards, the estate vineyards that are located on Gigondas, and a very, very, very small part on Châteauneuf. Actually, for the more story on Châteauneuf-du-Pape, this is a very recent acquisition. We had this vineyard in the 90s, in the middle of the 90s, and the vines were quite very old at this time, and in 2016 we decided to rip off the vines because they were far too old to produce correctly, and then the question was, what do we do? Do we replant it in red grapes, or we have to, if we did it, we'd had to wait for at least 20 years to have the same level in the wine quality. But regarding that, we decided to plant it in to replant the vineyard in white. So from the 2021 vintage, we will start to produce white Châteauneuf.
Question, Yves, there's a question based on the production. Can you let us know if all of the grapes are coming from the vineyards that you own, or do you purchase any grapes?
Yes, totally. We only work our own grapes.
Yeah, perfect.
We all these handpicked, and we only make wine from our own grapes.
Tell us a bit more about your fabulous Gigondas, Christian.
What do you want to know about it?
Everything, soils, climate, Mistral, anything. Why does it taste so good?
Because I'm the one who make it. Actually, it came from two main things. The localization is very important because, as I said earlier, most of the vineyards are located for Gigondas are located around all around the house. So you have terroir unity that is very important for the wine. Regardless on the blending, which is very classic in itself. We use a large part of Grenache, a little bit of Syrah, and a little bit of Mourvèdre too. Those are the three main grapes we use in Gigondas, like every other estate actually. But the main difference is that we have this terroir unity that many estates don't have, because with the generation changing and some vineyards are sold to other families, other estates have lost this unity in the time. This we still have this. We still have this unity, and it's very, very important for the wine characteristics. Actually, the way of making the wine is quite always the same. We have the same line of conduct, the same way of making the wine from one generation to another. The only thing that changes is that the technology is different. We have some tools now to make the work easier, actually, during the fermentation, especially. We have some stainless steel grids we can put in the vats during the fermentations that allows us to pump the wine more easily, because previously I remember I worked this way when you have we used to have some more small grids actually in the vat, and they se bouchaient régulièrement. They got full very fast, and it was very difficult to work that way because you always had to work on the grid to free it from the grapes, to manage to pump the wine. And as I said, this is only one example of the technology. The new technologies allowed us to make the wine more easily, but the way of making the wine is always the same. We pick up the grapes, we handpick the grapes always. We always wait for the right time to pick them, and the extraction is also very long. We use at least 3 weeks we pass 3 weeks to extract the wines after fermentations.
Maceration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is constant. Always at least 3 weeks. Yeah. But we always adapt ourselves to the type of the wine we want to make, and the vintage characteristic too, because from one year to another all is very different. So we always have to adapt ourselves to the grapes.
What's the average age of your vines in Gigondas? You've got some old vines.
Yep.
Very old vines, in fact.
I've got some old vines. My oldest vines are more than 100 years old.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Christian, sorry to interrupt you. There was the internet froze for me a second ago, so I was just wondering, did you mention anything about de-stemming? Do you de-stem fully? Do you partially de-stem?
As I said, we adapt every year. We adapt ourselves. We have a machine, the de-stemming machine, just in case. It is true that lately we use it very often, because especially for Côte d'Iron, to keep the wine soft. But on Gigondas, we don't de-stem the old vines, never. We only do that for the youngest wines, because usually the stems on the younger vines are have rough tannins. Mm-hmm. So we prefer to keep the softened tannins from the skin of the grapes, and put the rough tannins apart. On the other hand, you have on the older vine, the tannins, even in the stems, are often very softened. So it doesn't matter if we keep them or not. The stronger it is, the better. About the way we work the soils, perhaps a word. As you can see in this particular picture, we don't do anything during the winter. And this is made on purpose because we consider that the soils are sufficiently solicited during the production part of the year, to let them live their life during autumn and winter. That's why we stopped to work the soils by the middle of August. Usually, by the middle of August, we stop working the soils for two reasons. First, it's that there is no point really, agronomic point really, in working the soils at this period, and because it's when the grapes are already formed, and the maturity, they are ripening just by themselves. So working the soil is not very relevant for the maturity and the ripeness of the grapes. The second one is that if you work the soils too late in August, when you start picking in September, and if you have a rainy September, it's just hell in the vineyards with the mud. It's just hell. So we prefer to let the soils alone during this starting the end of August.
Because of the Mistral, is it hell? Why is it hell?
No, because of the mud. Because
mud.
usually by the end of August, between the end of August and the middle of September, it's quite calm. The weather is quite calm usually, but starting the second week of September, you can have some storms, some heavy rains. And if the soils are worked, and if you don't have grass on it, you have mud on the tractors. So you have mud everywhere. It's it's not. It's very bad for the soils, you know, because when you roll or walk on a nude soil that is wet, you destroy everything in your path. So it's better to have some grass on it, so the life can go on after the harvest. So we let the soil. Sorry.
Sorry, yesterday you mentioned in this picture the difference between how you farm versus how some of the other vineyard owners farm. And your vineyards are so alive and green, and their vineyards are brown and just look like they're fallow.
Yeah, yeah. You know, actually, this picture is what was made in by the end of the winter. So here you have a very clear difference between the neighbors' vineyards and mine. This way of working is very specific to us, because we started to work this way very early compared to our neighbors. Saint Gayan is in the state of traditions, very classic in its style, but we know how to adapt ourselves to the nature and to our vines. Actually, it's clear. It was clear from many years now that we had to let the soils live their life for the longest time we could afford it. Actually, in our region, it's quite impossible to have unworked soils because of the dryness and the heat during the summer. We have to work the soils to protect actually the soils. It's kind of it's a kind of contradiction, but in the way we cultivate the vines, we could see with our experience that that is the right way for what we want to do after with the wines. But we can see that our neighbors are still on the pure traditional way and very rigoristic way of working the soils. It's kind of disturbing because those are the same that tells everywhere that the weather is changing. They talk about deregulation, climate deregulation, extra. It's
Sorry, I missed that. Which wine are you talking about? Which one?
Origine,
Origine, the best.
15.
Okay.
What made the 15 so special?
Because it's a very particular vintage, which is very balanced between elegance and ripeness. Actually, it's a vintage that allows a high level of acidity and freshness to a high level of maturity, but it is not a heavy one like we could have in 11, for instance, because the balance of 11 was very different, more sunny, very classic in the vintage characteristic of the sunny vintage characteristics. Very softened, very rich, and the 15 is very different from that because of the high level, the high acidity level, and the high fresh. The Rasto and Gigondas share the same characteristic.
Okay, Christian. So the 2015 is the current vintage on the market. Most producers have younger vintages on the market. Why are you releasing your wines later than other people?
Actually, it's a matter of consistency and honesty, because in my point of view, every winemaker can make a very good wine, which can be very good in its 10 first years, five first years. But it is much more difficult to make a wine that lasts more than 10 years and keeps the same level or evolves in a linear way, in a constant way in the bottle. I could do some great wines, super fruity, deep colored, with softened tannins. All that the wine technology allows me to make that very easily. But to express the very potential of the soil, of the all that makes the terroir, it's much more difficult. And for that, to touch this potential, you have to wait for the wines, because even the better winemaker, even the better the best winemaker, even the best enologist, won't be able to foresee what the wine will be in 5 or 6 years. It's very, very difficult, especially for a very young wine, which is something very c'est quelque chose de très variable.
It varies a lot.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
it can be,
it's very changing.
here or it can be here. There's no consistency.
Yeah. You have to wait at least 2 or 3 years to see a little part of the potential of the wine. We consider that a wine can be bottled only if it's stabilized and aged properly, and the minimum aging period for us is 2 or 3 years, depending on the characteristic of the wines. Here we are in 2020. We are on the middle of the 15 vintage, actually. I think we will, if all goes well in Europe Vin sales, we will finish it by summer.
So the 2016 will be available later in the year. How was the 16 vintage for you?
Oh, actually 16 is more easy to be drunk vintage than 15. It's very good though, because it's very fruity, more fruity than 16, but it's two wines that are settled on the two very different lines, because 15 is more set on the spicy characteristics, the spicy aromas, and 16 is more on the fruit and the richness, you know, and the softness too.
And the weather conditions in the 2 years, they were quite different, or were they similar for 15?
Oh, very different. In 15 we had a very hot summer, but in 16 during the harvest we had a very heavy heat during September, and it was very hard for the hand pickers, actually. For all of us, it was very hard, very hot, and very difficult to work in the vineyards. And the balance of the grapes changed too. We had some vineyards that didn't ripe very well, and by the heat wave, with this heat wave, it accelerated the ripeness of the grapes. A little bit like in 2007, with the 2 weeks of Mistral we had, and it happens quite the same, but with the heavy heat in 16. So those are very different vintages. Yes. The balance is not set on the same line.
So we're actually very fortunate that we've got two great vintages coming along. So we've got 15 in the market right now, and the 16 is a fantastic vintage as well, when most of the competition have already sold out of these two vintages.
Yeah. I know that. But for me, it's not very good for the image of the global image of the appellation, because I think it gives a wrong picture of what Gigondas is and should be, actually. Most of my colleagues have to sell younger vintage because that's what the markets want, and they follow it. They have to, otherwise they couldn't sell anything. But I don't buy it. I don't buy it because Gigondas is not Côte d'Iron. Côte du Rhône, you can make a very good Côte du Rhône in 2 years. That's very easily. A very good and balanced Côte du Rhône can be made in 2 years of aging. But for Gigondas, it's very different because the terroirs are very different. They demand more work and more passion to reveal itself, and that's why we try to achieve by letting the wines balance themselves in our cellars for such a long time.
Okay.
And more wine growers are doing that today, releasing wines that are ready to drink instead of releasing wines that are too young in the market.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, they are. We all are very lucky because nowadays all the wines can be good. Actually, if I sold my Gigondas now, they could be drunk because they are already balanced. But on the a young wine balance actually, but this balance is meant to evolve and settle itself in the time. We made very Gigondas is like Chateauneuf. Those two wines are long-lasting and are meant to be long-lasting wines. If you drink one vintage, one fabulous vintage, like 15, too early, you will forget it, and the old points of such a wine like Gigondas or Chateauneuf is missed, because when you have such a wine, you have to remember it a long time after you drank it. This is a matter of thinking the wines actually.
So Christian, we noticed this photograph shows the range of the wines that you've produced historically, but you mentioned to us yesterday there's 2 new wines in the range.
Yep. Yeah, actually, we changed our way for the rosé. I told you earlier that Chateauneuf will be produced in white wines in 2 years now. Sablé is still the same. White Sablé is still the same. Very good. Long-lasting wine, white wine too. This is Côte du Rhône, that you know it. Rasto. Yes, Gigondas. Here it goes.
There we go. Yeah. So these are the 2 new wines.
Yeah.
They're delicious. They're brilliant. I love those. It's true. I did. I'd like some now, in fact.
So this comes from the village of Camaret-sur-Aigle, which is a village next to Orange, the great city next to Gigondas. The soils are very different from what we have in Gigondas or even in Rasto or Blanc de Dieu. Those are gray clays, stony, most of it, but mainly clays and clay soils, which is why we call this line argile. Previously, we had those vineyards in red, and they were meant to actually back up the other red wines. We used it to when we had some production issues or problem in the quality of the wines. We used some of the reds produced on those vineyards to back up the other red wines. But in 2011 we had very big freezing on those vineyards, and we lost more than half of the vines in Camaret. So like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, we had to make a choice, and when we replanted the vineyards, we decided to plant a large part of it in white, actually, because we wanted to start to try a new grape variety, which is called Picpoul. This choice was set by our need to adapt ourselves to the global warming, because Picpoul is like Bourboulenc, a very acid grape. It gives a lot of acidity and freshness to the wines, and in our point of view, this is what we will have to achieve in the future with the global warming. The classical grapes, I think, will be will be too heavy in the future. The wines will be too heavy in the future, and they need to have something to balance the blend. And Picpoul is one of the grapes that permits a good balance for wines.
Christian, could you move to the next slide? Because I think we actually have information on the white on the next slide. There we go. So the soils here are different to Gigondas.
Yeah, very. The soils in Camaret are far more rich, far richer than those on Gigondas. Production is higher, obviously. For now, the average production here is 35 hectoliters per hectare, but it will rise very quickly. This is only because it's actually only the third year we produce some whites on this vineyard.
Okay, James, you have a question?
It's Jim. For the Picpoul and the Bourboulenc, which soils are those planted on? Which are planted on clay? Which are on the?
Oh, they are planted. The three grapes are planted on the same soils, clay and stony clay.
Argile means clay.
The rosé comes from quite different blends because it comes from exclusively from red grapes.
Okay.
The blend is made of Grenache, Mourvèdre, and Cinsault, and a little bit of Carignan too.
Do you do Saignée, or do you have let the wine stay in skin contact, or do you blend a little red juice in?
No, we blend. We pick up all the grapes and press directly. Press the grapes directly. The color comes naturally from the press.
Excellent. And do you make a red under the Argile label as well, or do the red grapes go into just Côte de Rhône?
Actually, we sell it for now. It is sold in bulk.
Oh, okay, very good.
But in the future, we plan to make a specific bottle with the same labeling as the rosé to complete the line.
Are you still with us?
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the Rasto now as well? I don't think we've talked much about the Rasto. obviously the vineyards are different to Gigondas. What are the main differences between the Rasto vineyards and the Gigondas vineyards?
Actually, here you have yeah, the different types of soils we work with at the estate. Those limestone soils are very characteristic from Gigondas. Sandy soils are characteristic from Sablé. And the third one, the stony soil, is the main terroir for Rasto. We are of vineyards located in the south of the appellation, on the parts which is called Plan de Dieu, which means God's plain. And this is very specific because it's quite hot. The clays are very red, like a little bit like in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. But the soils are very flat, and always the vineyards are always windy, which gives a very specific situation for the vineyards. Usually it gives very rich wines that are a little bit tannic, and but it was true when the vines were young, but now that they have they are more than 30 years old, the grapes are more balanced, and the vines too, they are more consistent in the production and in the quality of the grapes.
In terms of vinification, Christian, do you use selected yeasts or natural yeasts?
Always natural.
Right.
It's very exceptional when we use we use selected yeast on the whites and the rosés,
Sure.
because we don't want to as we produce each time a tiny volume of each. We vin for the whites, for instance, we vinify the grapes separately. We vinify Viognier separately, Clairette separately, and so each time we make a very tiny volume of each grape. So we don't want to take the risk that bad yeast take over in the fermentation process. So we know some selected yeasts, some very old selected yeasts that can fermentate our grapes naturally and without giving some special taste, you know, like we know some yeast that gives banana aromas, some stuff like that. We don't want it. I don't like it. Oh, so when I make a wine, red, rosé, or white, I want it just after the fermentation to smell like wine. I don't. It's not in my taste to have some external aromas or external tastes, which we called in enology primal aromas. Primary aromas. Those are like banana, strawberries, but they are very pleasant in the nose, but they are very easy to go to. Those aromas don't last very long in wine. So for me, it's not very relevant to search for those aromas. My whites, my rosés just smell like wine just after the fermentations. Yeah. That's the way I want it to be.
In terms of the aging process for the three main wines that we sell in the US, the Côte d'Or, the Rasto, the Gigondas, the aging process, can you explain how, basically your philosophy for aging in oak, in vat, and are the different grape varieties treated in a different way, or do they all get the same treatment?
Actually, it depends on the wine, because we don't age Côte d'Rône, Rasto, and Gigondas the same way. Gigondas is aged in wood. Here you have the middle-sized barrels we call demi-nuit. Those are
600 liters.
600 liters. Yeah. On the photo, and picture, yeah. Here. Next to Jean-Pierre and me, you have our big barrels we call foudre. This one on the right, on the left of Jean-Pierre is 1,800 liters foudre. And we always try to use big contents wood, because we found out that those kind of contents are more fit to the Southern Rhone wines. Actually, the small barrels, the 200-liter barrels, gives too much wood taste to the wines, and they don't we don't find they get along so well with the Southern Rhone wines. For us, this is a matter of wood and wine ratio. You know, the surface of the wood and the thickness of the wood is very important in the ratio with the wine, the liquid. And we found out that bigger contents like foudre or demi-nuit are more fit for aging the wines properly and give them the balance they need.
And Christian, how long do you use the barrels for? Do you have new barrels, or do you use them for a long time?
Last time I bought demi-nuit was 5 years ago.
Right, so not a lot of new oak.
No, I've got one demi-nuit that is older than Jean-Pierre.
Right, okay. And so do you have any specific barrel makers that you prefer to work with, or?
Actually, the last one is very very interesting because they work their products are gives more elegance to the wines. Their philosophy is quite like ours.
Who's that,
they work.
Which barrel maker?
The name of the barrel maker.
Yes.
It's this one is Cadus.
Okay, Cadus is a Burgundy maker, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Burgundy maker. But this is the previous one. We worked with them only twice, and the last one is called Rousseau.
Right.
This is also a Burgundy barrel maker, but their philosophy is quite like ours. They work slowly but surely.
Okay.
But, with a lot of accuracy, actually.
Right, okay. So there's a couple of other questions that I would like to ask you. You mentioned the name of the Gigondas Origine, and the name was why it was called Origine. What is the background to the names Ilex and Trécart?
Actually, for Trescart, this is very simple. This is the name of one branch of the family, Jean-Pierre's family.
Okay.
By his mother's side. It's a very old family that comes from Sablé, actually. And Ilex for Rasto is the name of the previous oak that grew on the Rasto territory of the Plan de Dieu. Actually, the vineyard of the vineyards of Plan de Dieu are very, very recent, very young. Jean-Pierre's mother remembers that when she was young, she went through a very deep forest to cross the Plan de Dieu. Now it's very different because it's not a forest anymore. You have some woods, some tiny woods from time to time, but previously it was a very deep forest. And the main tree that grows on this area was Quercus ilex, green oak.
Yeah, so it was the last oak in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, concerning Rasto, there is a very significant difference in the blending. We use about 25% of Mourvèdre. It's very important because first we chose to plant more Mourvèdre in this particular terroir because it fits very well the terroir of Plan de Dieu. And it gives more character to the wine, but not being too rough. Actually, one thing that is quite funny that most people ask me if Rasto is aged in wood because of the taste of the Mourvèdre. But it's not at all. We age the Rasto only in that.
Okay. And so, what is the production of each of the different cuvées, Christian?
Actually, we I don't even know the numbers.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's written on there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, here you can tell easily that we make a lot more cases of Gigondas than any other wine.
So that is where the focus of our sales should be, is on the Gigondas.
Totally.
Which vintages have you got in the market?
For now, it's 15.
I mean, the American market.
On the American market for both Rasto and Gigondas, we
only have 15 in the.
You're welcome.
Hey, Christian, there's a question about the grape varieties that you have in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. What are the white varieties that you've planted in Châteauneuf-du-Pape?
Actually, the main variety we planted in Châteauneuf-du-Pape is Claret, because it's in our point of view the grape of the white grape of the future, because it's a grape that is very well adapting to global warming, and it's a grape that is self-balanced. Actually, you can make wines with only this grape, which is not the case with other grapes like Bourboulogne, for instance, or Roussanne. Claret is very, very self-balanced, and the blend
has a lot of natural acidity, right?
Yeah. Natural acidity, very high level of ripeness too, and a low sugar level. We can achieve, contrary to Viognier, which ripes well around 40 and 15 degrees of alcohol. With Claret, you can have a ripeness, a perfect ripeness at only maximum of 14. which is very good for the global fashion that is not very fond of alcohol level. But yeah, concerning Chateauneuf, the main grapes will be white claret and pink claret too.
Okay. And which part of Châteauneuf-du-Pape is the parcel located?
Actually, it's settled between Beaucastel and La Janasse,
Right.
just next to the road, the highway.
Hmm.
A very good terroir too.
Good neighbors.
Yeah. As long as you don't see them. No, I'm joking. I know a little bit of the parent family, and but we actually as we are very far away, we don't have many contacts with our the other neighbors.
Yeah. Christian, there's one thing I wanted to say at the beginning, and I omitted to say it. More for the relevance for our regional managers who are on the conference call. The relationship between Europe Vin and St. Gayan goes back almost 40 years, right to the beginning of Europe Vin's history. I know Christopher Canan was working with Jean-Pierre's father right at the beginning of Europe Vin. So there's a lot of history between the two of us, and a lot of, should I say, a huge story that we want to continue for many years to come. It's a relationship which we value very, very much, and we will do everything we can to continue to promote St. Gayan in the States and the rest of the world.
That's great to hear. On my side, I will try to keep the way we always made wine.
Fantastic. Please keep doing so.
Thank you.
Now, if anyone wants to ask any questions, I think now would be a good time.
Well, Christian, on behalf of the team in the United States, we want to thank you very much for this. I appreciate you also going through a dry run with myself, Kirk, and Rod yesterday. I hope that you found this as entertaining and educational as we did. There'll probably be a lot more questions that come out of this, which usually happens at the end of the conferences. And we want to thank you for your continued commitment and the history with Europe Vin, and we will do our part to make sure that you're proud of us in the United States and that we represent the wines with the same kind of passion that you make them. So thank you very much.